Good morning to all the conference attendees and to the organizers. Being asked to speak to African MBAs is a true honor for me because of the crucial role that business minds of blended experiences have played in evolving the African business landscape. But I also have a special place in my heart for Africa Business Conferences because I ran one of them many years ago and I know how hard it is to pull them off. So congratulations to the organizers. As I reflected on giving this address, I thought about graduation speeches and how the graduation season inspires reflection on personal growth and the transformation of the individual. But the African business conferences that are held throughout the year really serve as a time for us to reflect on Africa's development as a business and investment destination, as well as our individual and collective roles / responsibilities in moving the continent forward through capital, operations, technology, innovation, etc. I attended one of the first Africa Business Conferences held in the US anyway, over 20 years ago. And I've enjoyed watching the topics evolve alongside Africa's economic journey. Decades ago, we discussed the telecommunications revolution and how it would lay the foundation for true economic transformation. And while there have been many other small, large revolutions since that time, I'm going to explore today the energy transition, likened to be one of the most significant inflection points in Africa's current development trajectory. And with that bold statement, let me detail a few data points that I think are important to provide some context, especially given the diversity of the audience. So forgive me if some of this is repetitive. Africa's current population is about 1.2 billion people, and it's estimated that by 2050, there will be an additional 1.1 billion people on the continent, and that an additional 950 million people will live in cities by 2030. So in other words, a lot of growth is going to be urban, and currently about 650 million Africans don't have access to energy, and 900 million Africans don't have access to clean cooking. So that's the majority of the population and presents a great challenge, but also a great opportunity. In the context of net zero, many African countries have started putting forward net zero plans, net zero targets, but the reality is that net zero objectives have to come effectively with complete electrification of the economy. And so if we're coming from a world where 650 million, 60% of Africa does not have access to energy, then a full electrification of Africa on a pathway to net zero is a Herculean task and is going to require really a lot of capital. The other interesting data point is that about 50% of Africa's potential emissions actually are going to come from industries and drivers that have not been built. So a lot of Africa's energy transition needs are really about future growth, not on sort of existing emissions. But ultimately, without low carbon infrastructure, the rapid development and growth of Africa really could risk locking in gray pathways. So decisions we make today on how infrastructure is built, how the region is energized, will shape the continent's carbon footprint to come. So while energy access is one of Africa's greatest challenges, it also presents one of the greatest opportunities to reposition African economies for a green future. Rapidly scaling up energy access using clean and sustainable technologies while leveraging innovative business models and financial structures will manifest, as did the digital revolution, a means for Africa to build its economies and energy systems in cleaner and smarter ways. Now, while we would all love for Africa to leapfrog, I know we're all getting very sick of that word, but to leapfrog the development curve, practically, it's a lot more difficult. The energy transition for African countries must be a country-specific or region-specific approach, taking into cognizance specific economic nuances of nations, regions, etc. A major achievement, for example, at COP26 last year was the $8.5 billion energy transition program for South Africa, and it's expected to drive the repurposing of the shutting down of coal plants, upscaling renewable energy, and cleaner industrialization. The program took about 3 years to design, and many countries are seeking to replicate it. We must recognize, however, that South Africa is a very different country from other African nations. In fact, while the contribution to GHG emissions by Africa is estimated to be up to 4%, ex-South Africa and Egypt, that is, without South Africa and Egypt, Africa's contribution to GHG emissions is closer to 0.55%. And so for those countries with poor electricity access, like Nigeria, for example, it's more important to add and distribute energy capacity across multiple verticals using renewable sources as much as possible, as this is more of the priority relative to replacements as such. But as you think about it, renewable energy alone is not going to achieve the transition. Electrification includes grid expansion, grid stability, smart distribution, off-grid and on-grid integrated models, efficient buildings, clean transport. What does that look like for Africa? And this all costs money and requires a great deal of policy support. Nigeria, for example, has estimated the cost of full electrification and transition to have a price tag of about $400 billion. While the developed economies committed at the various UN climate conferences to support developing economies with $100 billion a year, energy transition also implies the need for investing in sectors that have not always qualified as climate or green, such as transmission, distribution. But this is changing, and that's really positive. I think there's been a lot of open conversations about what this is really going to take, and there is listening happening. Now, us in the finance industry, we get really excited when we hear about large ticket gaps or large investment needs, because we really see these as investment opportunities. You have to have that attitude in Africa. And we really see that these needs present a meaningful way to think about energy transition. But when we do that, you can't look at finance alone. There are sort of other key nodes in this spectrum that need to happen for there to be an energy transition, and I want to point out two. The first is the need for a robust supply chain. The number of solar panels, batteries, and equipment to deliver Africa's energy transition is going to be significant. Africa's energy cannot and should not be delivered solely from manufacturing systems abroad. The green value chain, second, is just as important to entrenching the greening of an economy as is the green energy. While conversations around supply chains, value chains, manufacturing start to touch on what has become the most delicate item of all, jobs. Jobs for who? At what wage rate? And at what quality? And what technical sophistication level? These are all the points that come up when you start talking about supply chains and manufacturing. It's important that the global community does not see the green future as a zero-sum game. Georgetown MBAs are in a unique and relevant position to overlay business, economic development, and diplomacy during a time when, once again, energy and its value chain will be at the crossroads of geopolitical policy, both international and domestic. It will take brilliance and skill to fashion an economic order around the energy transition for both developed and developing economies, to create synergies which make the world better off in a holistic way. It's crucial that the leaders in this room and beyond tackle these difficult issues, because the mutual benefit of the energy transition is what will mobilize peace, prosperity, and a safe planet for us all. Our failure to deliver a just, equitable, and peaceful energy transition by making the green future a real benefit to all people will be our collective failure as the generation tasked to transform the path of the planet. There's a great book that I read now and again. It's called The Medici Effect. And the book explores the intersection where ideas from different fields and cultures meet and collide, ultimately igniting an explosion of new discoveries. And while these themes are centered on innovation, I think about them a lot when I think about the energy transition and what it will take. This combustion, no pun intended, of ideas across technology, finance, politics, and diplomacy will be critical. Our generation, your generation, has the capacity to deliver what the world needs at this time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts on a topic which means a lot to me. I hope I have given you some nuggets to reflect on as you seek to change the world. Now go forth and conquer.